Okay, so you're considering branching out and selling your products in a different way than just direct sales, whether that's selling through your website, brick and mortar, shows and events, or any other form of direct sales. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the difference between selling retail versus wholesale or white label or even private label, then stick around to the end of this video. We're going to talk about some advantages to doing so, but also some tips along the way as well. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you are new, my name is Wade with Black Tie Barn. Here on this channel, we talk about making and selling candles as well as other related products and running even a handcrafted business in general. So hopefully you guys enjoy this video and I answer some of these questions that you may have had on your mind. And if you're interested in any other future content, consider subscribing below. Give this video a thumbs up if you don't mind. And let's go ahead and talk about today's topic. So I did a recent video titled Making Millions with Candles. And it was all about well, it was answering a few questions that some of you subscribers had asked me, but it was really, the purpose of the video was really to talk about some tips and things to think about when you're running a candle business. Well, one of the questions, or actually several questions I got as a response to that video, was to talk a little bit more about wholesale and white label and what is the difference and are there any things to know about each one. So that is really the focus of today's video. But like I mentioned before, if you stick around to the end, I'm going to talk about some advantages to selling that way and also some tips to do so as well. So first and foremost, let's just recap very quickly what retail is. Well, that's essentially if you are making your products and selling them directly yourself, usually that is retail. However, retail really means making products and then selling them through like a storefront. So a storefront or even online e-commerce. But what I really mean is just direct sales. So you're making your products and you're selling them directly yourself. And that is what a lot of candle makers, most candle makers in fact, will do maybe their entire candle making career, but at least for a good portion of it, especially starting out. Now, a lot of you are familiar with wholesale as well, and we're definitely going to talk about that, but we're also going to compare and contrast that with two other methods of selling that are similar and related, but not quite the same as wholesale. And that is called white label and private label. But let's back up 1 second and talk about wholesale first. So if wholesaling is brand new to you, you're essentially making your products and then you're going to sell them to a retailer, so sell them to another store to then sell your products for you. You will make a profit off of selling it to them and then they will make a profit off of selling it in their store. Now, the way this typically works is you have to sell them at a much more discounted rate, generally around 50% and sometimes even less than that, so that they have some room to mark up or add margin when they sell at retail. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about wholesale in a minute, but let's compare and contrast that to two other forms of, again, similar and related but different than wholesale, and that is called white label and private label. Well, let's start off with white label. Now, white label is something that I do myself, and many of you maybe do it as well. And that is sort of like wholesale in the sense that you're making products that you then sell to someone else, except there's one key difference. It is not your label on that candle. The label is for the retailer. It is their brand. They are selling it under their name. You're just making the product for them. Now, there are people on both sides of the fence of this, whether or not you think that's a right decision to make for your business, because you do lose some of your own branding and your own brand awareness if you're not using your own label. But then the other side of it, including me, is it's just another form of business. It's another revenue stream. So I'm making products that I sell to a customer, sort of like wholesale, and then they just use them label themselves. Now, I won't do this to direct competitors or anyone right around me in my same area selling, but I have no problems doing this with other clients, especially ones that are not in my direct location. Now, you might be wondering, well, then what is private label? Because that also sounds like private label. And there's one distinct but very critical difference between white label and private label. As a reminder, white label is you're making products. It's the same candles or same products that you make all the time for even your own business. And these specific candles aren't sold exclusively to anyone else. You just make them and then put on a different label for that white label client. Well, private label is exclusive products made specifically for that company, for that business. It is their branding, it's their label, but you don't sell those other candles or products to anyone else. It is made, developed, created specifically for them. That means they know everything about the product, the materials, the recipe, everything. It's really their product. You just happen to be making it for them. So in other words, you're sort of the manufacturer for them. The big difference between white label and private label is exclusivity. So a private label, I'm making products specifically for this company, and white label is I make these candles, I make these products, and anyone can sell them, including myself. The difference is I just put someone else's label on it. Now, I know some of you are probably wondering right now, which of those three do I do, or any combination of those? Well, I do wholesale and white label. I do not do any private label. I have before and I am not against it, but there are some disadvantages to private label, especially as a small business, because it makes it much more difficult for you to manage. And because you're not making as much in bulk that you can use for other purposes, it's almost like running a separate business. And it can be quite challenging starting out unless you've got a lot of space, a lot of capacity, a lot of resources. It's generally something that you can maybe tackle on down the road if you want. But I'm also just not as much of a fan of specifically making something for someone else that I can't use for anything else. It would have to be very niche or something very, very specific of why I would make it for that business, for business A, but not for businesses B through Z. Hopefully that makes sense. So that is a summary of the differences between retail, wholesale, white label, and private label. Hopefully that answers most of the questions that you have about what they are and how they work. But now I want to talk about some advantages to considering those other approaches. But we're mostly going to talk about wholesale because wholesale is what most of us in this community will undertake before these other options. And then stick around because after we talk about some of the advantages, I'm going to give you some tips along the way as well. So again, these are specific to wholesale, but some of them may apply as well to the others. But specific to wholesale, one major advantage is broader reach for your brand. So increased brand awareness. Your brand has the ability to reach places faster, but also the capacity to reach places further. When you are selling your products to retailers that are already established businesses, or businesses that use a lot more resources like marketing and advertising, it's easier and faster for them to promote your product than it is for you, at least starting out, which means they're doing a lot of the advertising and marketing for you, which is related to the second advantage of selling wholesale, is that you don't have to worry as much about promotion. You really don't have to do any promotion or advertising or marketing because they're your only customer. Now, I should clarify that doesn't mean you're also not selling directly yourself. So if you are running a website or Facebook business page or Instagram store or anything like that, that doesn't mean you're not also promoting your own products. But in terms of the wholesale account, you don't have to worry about that. And so if you're a small business that only does wholesale, you have literally very little promotion and ad expenses that you have to worry about. It's kind of nice. Now, you do have to do a little bit of legwork to get out there and get some wholesale clients, but once you have them, you're not worried about any direct advertising. And then that leads into the third advantage, and that is all about COA or cost of acquisition. What that means in terms of retail or running any type of product-based business, or really any service-based business for that matter, is that there is a cost to acquire all customers. When you are selling wholesale, your cost of acquisition, your cost to get new customers is much lower because you're not having to worry about the advertising. You're not having to worry about the promotion. You only have the wholesale client as your customer, and then it's their job to sell to other customers. And then probably the final and really important benefit, I think, of selling wholesale is consistency. Consistency in your sales. As a small business, maybe using your own website or again, Instagram or Facebook store or something like that, you will have great months and poor months. And it's all about finding a balance over the course of a year. But it's kind of hard to plan and to know what's going to happen month to month, week to week. But in terms of wholesale, it's usually a little bit more consistent. Now you will still have some ups and downs and definitely some heavy seasons versus not as heavy seasons. But generally speaking, wholesale customers, wholesale clients are purchasing from you on a more consistent basis. So it's a little bit easier to plan your business and to expect consistent sales or expect consistent revenue coming in. And then finally, it's just another source of revenue. So as I talked about in that Making Millions with Candles video, which I will link at the end of this video, but also in the description below, I talked about having several branches to that money tree, several sources of revenue, several ways to sell your products and make money in your business so that not all of your eggs are in one basket. Well, this is another one of those options. Wholesale is a great way to build your brand up, to build your business up. Now, with that being said, you have to remember that your profit on wholesale products is much lower, usually at least 50%, at least half of what you would normally make or profit on a direct sale. But the purpose of wholesale is volume and brand awareness, brand reach. So you're trying to build your business up, but also sell more volume. And that is what makes up the difference. And that is why wholesale can be a great opportunity once you get to that point and you're ready for it. Speaking of being ready for it, let's talk about a few tips to dive into wholesaling. Tip number one is to get your pricing down first. If you don't have your pricing ready to go, you will lose the customer before you even really had a chance. They're going to expect you to be ready and not just kind of winging it, because most retailers are looking for an established company that can provide them quality and consistency, and they want to be able to trust you. And if they reach out or you start a conversation and they ask about your pricing, you say, well, I'm not sure, let me get back to you. that you're going to lose that customer 99% of the time. So have your pricing ready to go first. Now, a little tip as far as pricing goes, I've got several videos on my channel that you can check out at your own convenience, but there are different ways to come up with your wholesale pricing. Some people subscribe to the method of whatever your cost is, double that, and that is your wholesale amount, and then double that, and that becomes your retail amount. So it's called the 2x, 4x rule. That is a general kind of good starting point for running wholesale, and there's really nothing wrong with that approach, especially starting off. But that can be challenging because you don't know exactly what each of your items is costing you. There's a lot that goes into figuring out correct pricing. So I'm going to mention what I use to help me figure out pricing, and feel free to look into this a little bit more if you'd like, but I do have a link in the video below, and I have a playlist for this as well, but it's called Crafty Base. Now, it is a software that I pay for, but it's not very much monthly, but it can really help you with your pricing. It does a lot more than that. It also helps with bookkeeping and managing your expenses, your inventory, which is the most important thing for me to manage. It also creates and maintains and tracks your recipes so you know exactly how to replicate a process over and over. But in terms of this video, it also provides pricing guidance. So it offers, based off the cost of your products, what you should be pricing your products for retail plus wholesale. And then you can even set up other pricing mechanisms as well, maybe white label or friends and family or whatever. You can have all these different price kind of tiers set up, and then Crafty Base will help you hone in on what some good price recommendations are. So I love it. I wanted to mention that since we're talking about wholesale and pricing. It's a great software. Check it out. Again, I do have a link in the description below and some other videos to help you along the way as well. Speaking of pricing, before I forget, one major difference that I didn't talk about with wholesale versus white label that I know some of you are probably wondering, and that is about the pricing. As I talked about, wholesale is generally 50% of what you would normally sell the candle for retail. Or another way of looking at it is double the cost of you to make that product. And I mean all the costs that go into making that product. White label is a little bit different. You should probably start off by charging white label just a little bit more than you would your wholesale clients. The major reason for that is you are losing your ability for brand awareness because it's not your label, it's not your brand that is out there. It is the other companies. You're making a product that another customer is claiming is theirs. Now, again, it's a great option for additional revenue, but because you're taking a hit to your own brand awareness and growth, at least in terms of brand, it's worth arguing and defending that your pricing should be a little bit higher than wholesale. Now, there is a lot of debate on how much higher, but generally speaking, I would say your white label pricing should be a little bit higher than wholesalers. Now, those are starting points and guidelines. You will always have to negotiate with your businesses, with your clients, and come up with something that you both agree on, but that's a good starting point. Tip number 2, after you know your pricing, it's important to have a line sheet. Sometimes people call this a rate sheet, but it's technically called a line sheet. What this basically is a sheet that shows all your product names, SKUs if you have them, your prices. It's almost like a wholesale master list. Think of it that way. You really need that line sheet. Now, it can be digitized. It could be something manual. It depends on how you're getting your wholesale clients. But if you're going to stop by local small businesses and boutiques, definitely take one with you, multiple ones with you. And then if you're having it online, just make sure it's something that you can send them directly or there's a link directly to it. It's really important to have a line sheet for them to take you seriously, but it also just makes your life easier. You're not trying to wing it. You're not trying to get materials and things in order at the last minute. You already have something ready to go, and then you just provide it to the customer. And of course, this goes without saying, but anytime you change your pricing or change anything about your products, make sure you update your line sheet as well. Tip number 3, I just touched on this a little bit, but if you're selling online, not just walking to brick and mortar stores, but you do have an e-commerce solution for your wholesale clients and potential customers, make sure you have a good user-friendly website. That website should have a storefront for your wholesale clients, or there should be some type of obvious difference between the wholesale products and the retail products. It could be the pricing, it could be a different page, whatever it is, make sure that there is some distinction so that wholesale clients know how to shop your products. A lot of candle makers and small businesses that are just starting out will generally just say, for wholesale inquiries, please contact me or fill out this form. And then they'll just send a line sheet directly. So you don't have to have it as part of your website, just if you do, make sure it's clear that there's a distinction between wholesale prices and retail prices. Tip number 4, before you take on a wholesale client, make sure that you realize that they are tax exempt. That means you do not charge them sales tax because they will be charging sales tax when they sell the item. So in order to do that correctly, make sure you get a copy of their sales tax ID, their sales tax number, or even a copy of their sales tax certificate. That shows that you've collected that information. So if you were ever audited or had to prove why you didn't charge sales tax to a particular client, you can say, well, I was offered their sales tax certificate, or here's their sales tax ID number. And then that way you have that documentation of why they were tax exempt and you sold the products to them tax free. As always, with any kind of legal or tax information, I am not an attorney. I am not an accountant. This is just general information. So please always remember to check with your own local, state, and federal regulations and institutions. All right, last but not least, now that you have all these ducks in a row, make sure you have your minimums in place. It's always wise if you're going to have wholesale clients that you have minimums in place. That could be minimum price thresholds or minimum products sold. If a potential wholesale client, or retailer in this case, reaches out to you with some interest in selling your products and they want you to wholesale their products, you should never take on that type of account with only orders of just a few candles at a time. The purpose of wholesale and those price breaks is because you're selling in volume. It needs to be worth it to you and your business to work with this wholesale client. Now, some people are afraid to mention that and are afraid to ask for a certain minimum quantity because they don't want to appear pushy or needy or greedy or anything like that, but it's just a fact of life and it's a fact of running a business. You cannot sustain a business by running wholesales with small minimums because you will end up being taken advantage of. And it's got to be worth your time and money. Wholesale accounts are 50% of the profit for you as it is, and so you need to make that up in volume. And that is how you sustain a wholesale relationship with a retailer. Now, I did mention it can be a minimum price threshold or a minimum product threshold. It's up to you. If you say, well, you just have to purchase a minimum of 20 candles or you need to purchase a minimum of 25 melts, that's totally up to you, especially if you only sell one or two types of products. That's fairly easy and straightforward. Personally, I go with the minimum amount threshold because I have variation of product. So if I said you had to buy 20 candles or 25 melts or 15 of this type of candle, but 25 of this type of candle, it would get very confusing. And so I just like to set a threshold of a purchase amount. Now, there are two minimums you should have in place. Generally speaking, one is an initial order threshold and then a reorder minimum. So your initial minimum is usually a little higher because you want to make sure that they are a serious customer and that they are really interested in your products and that they're going to give your products a fair chance. So let's say your minimum initial order needs to be $250. So the first order that a client or a retailer purchases with you should be for a total amount of $250 or more. Now, after that point, you can have reorder points, and maybe it's only $100 at a time. And that is once you have an established relationship with that retailer. Now, those were just numbers. It could be different for every business. It's whatever makes sense for you and whatever comfortable for you. There is no hard, fast rule to this, and I don't want to try to recommend something for one that might not work for another. And I've even changed mine over the years. But I think the concept is enough there to help you get going in the right direction. If you're interested in learning any more about candle making, running a candle business, or anything else even behind the scenes, check out the link to the new newsletter in the description below. It will take you to a little landing page. Just put in your email address. I will not spam you. It's purely for anyone interested in more content. So I might let you know when new blog posts are active or when new resources are out there or maybe updates on my favorite waxes or when videos post or really anything related, I will send out in that newsletter. Now, at the time of shooting this video, it's not quite ready yet, but you can go ahead and sign up while I'm working on it in the back end. So if you're interested in checking that out, it's in the description below. I would love to have you. Also, check out my other social platforms. I run a Facebook group. Of course, I'm on Facebook. I have an Instagram and a TikTok. You can see all those links in the description below as well. Check out some other videos. I appreciate you all for being here. Hopefully you found this video helpful. I will see you all next time.